Do you think learning in these changing days for humanity, with the rise of things like AI in a society increasingly run by technocrats and billionaires, leaves us feeling worse off than just keeping our eyes on our own business and trying not to think about the issues that we face as a species today? I really appreciate a great scholar's words when she said, there are two kinds of people, those who think there are two kinds of people and those who don't. All jokes aside, the inflammations worldwide, some of which include the highest starvation rates recorded among children over the last century in Gaza today, a patrol force in disguise where I live, grabbing people off the streets and putting them in forced labor camps, a mass incarceration epidemic where Black and brown people make up 90% of prison populations, a direct result of racial profiling, not higher rates of violence, and a debt and rent crisis where the largest demographic in the US facing homelessness across the board are people ages 50 to 75. There being no aid or programs for aging really with any dignity at all in the United States today. When we learn about this and more on our social media feeds or by word of mouth, does it do more harm emotionally to us than we can really afford? Are people who aim to live authentically really doomed to a sober or gloomy attitude as they come to know more about what's really going on? I think that the answer is twofold. How I would say it most simply is yes, unless. And the reason that caveat is included is because of fluid compensation, which I'll break down in simple terms. I'll be discussing with you today whether people drawn to ask the hard questions and learn the truth and grow in the current landscape of society are really doomed to experience less joy as a result, and how you can still access joy while being a teachable and curious person in today's world. Before we get into that, I know you may think hitting subscribe doesn't mean much, but to me, your attention is valuable. That's why I'm committed to making thoughtful, provocative, well-researched videos for you to better understand the ways that society, history, and consciousness play a direct role in our happiness and the impact that we have over our lifetime. If you would like to feel more grounded while exploring the deeper questions in life, I'd like to walk this path with you. Just hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. Okay, now let's get back to the video. According to a psychological theory called the meaning maintenance model, people have a need for meaning in a broader sense. Because of this, any experience that violates the meaning system within one's private inner life will evoke a negative arousal state, prompting an automatic process called fluid compensation. This is the key hypothesis in the meaning maintenance model, and it says that when meaning is threatened in a certain area, individuals respond in a direct or indirect way to restore meaning through other means, fields, or domains. This means could be through material gains, like buying a new pair of sunglasses when trust in a friend is lost, or putting extra energy towards a hobby when a work project loses its meaning or suddenly terminates. A research study in 2020 tested this with an experimental group who were given a task to complete that unexpectedly terminated about halfway through. Researchers saw participants, quote, really put their heart and soul into the following experimental task, which correlated to the measured brain states when compared to the control group. This study, and at least two other studies that I will cite in the video description, support the hypothesis that fluid compensation is a naturally occurring automatic process that humans undergo when a concept or previously understood norm has lost meaning or ground. Another study from 2011 showed that when individuals had their autonomy threatened, there was a compensatory reflex to proportionally regain autonomy. And if that proved difficult or impossible, then compensation would happen through some other means to attain another state proportional in meaning to the autonomy that was lacking. I'm willing to bet that all people experience fluid compensation first as children, and I can give an example of how. Imagine a child believes that the fairies leave coins on the doorstep each night, who excitedly checks the entryway each morning when the breakfast meal is over and after his father has left for work. Over the period of about a month, he collects a good amount of coins. At some point, the boy tells his parents he will be buying candy, and when they ask where the money came from, he says, from the fairies, and they look at each other with a puzzled expression until it clicks. The boy's mother has known for a little while that there's a small hole in the pocket of the father's duster jacket that hangs by the door, and some days in the morning when the boy's father puts on his jacket leaving for work and digging into the pocket for the car keys, a few coins slip through the small hole. When confronting the boy, the parents can't just say, there's no such thing as fairies, and leave it there. This won't satisfy. And this is because the need for meaning is a basic drive that we all share. In order for an argument that dismisses the idea of fairies to be accepted, it must be replaced with a more legitimate reason that fills the space, so to speak, that the image of the fairies invokes for the child. The explanation that follows to take the place of the previous view must carry meaning, and that's how our minds work. And as a woman coming from recovery, I see this in spaces where others are attempting to overcome addiction, specifically people who successfully overcome addiction. I observe that those people replace the meaning that chemical substance had for them when they were using with something of equal or greater value, greater purpose, and meaningful power. And power, something about power, it only respects greater power. The power of addictive habits can only be overcome by the power of a more meaningful direction. Those who think they'll get clean for their heart health, but don't really place much value or meaning toward their body or heart, don't tend to stay clean. Most likely, they'll come to see at some point that something else brings deeper satisfaction, and they will come to replace the old satisfaction of being high with this new relationship or wellness routine or social connection for those who are able to recover. Most successful are those who simultaneously adopt a spiritual life, which replaces the power that drugs once held for them. For all of these replacements that I've mentioned, fluid compensation is the technical term for how and why this happens. And this is why I say, when answering the question, are people drawn to asking hard questions and finding out the truth, doomed to a life of joylessness? Are they doomed to give up joy? I answer, yes, they are, unless their compensation replaces what no longer holds meaning with some higher, stable, irrefutable meaning. When a very grounded and untouchable meaning is the basis underlying one's motivations, joy is always in the picture because it transcends individual circumstances and thoughts. Through my work with personal inner work and then in my career, I have come to learn through many years of dissolving the ego systematically with wholeness work that the ego will not be present to experience that which is beyond itself. The Tao Te Ching says, only a student who gives himself can receive the master's gift. If you think otherwise, despite your knowledge, you have blundered. Giving and receiving are one. This is called the great wonder, the essential mystery, the very heart of all that is true. As students of life, we must be open and willing to have our minds change. Be open to being humbled by the receiving that happens when personal desires are no longer the motivation that propels one through life. But that's not how most people are able to live right now, especially if they're balancing work with relationships, with keeping up with the news. It's not just buying stuff to fill the void within that describes fluid compensation for most people today. Instead, it's living from one TV show to podcast to Instagram feed to the next short form content buzzword dopamine hit. The fluid compensation works in the algorithm, and this is not by mistake. Did that last video on TikTok leave you feeling bummed out? Pop on over to YouTube to find something better. Our attention spans are shorter than ever, and access to digital content, meaningless essentially, but dressed up in a package that tells your brain it's meaningful, it keeps that hollowness inside gaping and gasping for more. This works really, really well for late capitalism, which feeds on people craving and grasping for consumables. But what it doesn't work for is more and more strikingly obvious. It doesn't work for you. Your sense of satisfaction can't reach a stable level because the replacements for meaning are usually shallow. The good news is that if you are maladapted to a sick society, you're already yearning for something deeper than egoic or superficial desires. Being uncomfortable in an uncomfortable situation is a sign of wisdom in you that is asking to be heeded. The modern life of the average person revolves around gains in status, security, or material things. When the news is bad, it usually triggers fear in oneself around losing one or more of these domains, or a fear of not getting more of them. The truth is that we have direct access to an immaterial wealth that holds a deeper meaning and greater stability than temporary gains like security and status. It is written of in wisdom traditions spanning millennia in one way or another. I will call it awareness. I want to be crystal clear with you here. Awareness is not thinking. Thoughts have a beginning and an end, while awareness is prior to thoughts, is present during thoughts, and remains when a thought ends. The wisdom of Lao Tzu, again, he says, I call it that to which all things return. And he doesn't mean at the moment of death. He means awareness. When you wake up in the morning, the first thought, even if it's not explicit, is usually, I am awake. That means something new all the while I am asleep. And moreover, something was present to know I am awake now, even before the thought formed. That presence, that aliveness is captivating only in its ubiquitousness. All beings have and know that. A snail has awareness, a cell has awareness, and each Bacteria, when observed under a microscope, has an obvious awareness. Most of us wouldn't doubt that living things are aware, but many people overlook that and fail to understand the power in the presence of existence itself. You don't have to crumble under the weight of current events, and you don't have to bury your head in the sand either. Nihilism is the root of outgrowths and cults like fascism and the manosphere and skinny talk. But we have a choice to let those mindsets be a source of meaning for us, or to dig deeper and find a ground to stand on that really feels real. What could be more real, more stable than that awareness or aliveness that you have never known a moment of your life without? You can affect real change by orienting toward the meaning of yourself and simply being, and simultaneously recognizing that we share our being with everyone and everything. And when we consider imprisoned people, people who are prisoners of war, the best outcome for them is freedom from their bondage, right? But what keeps people with no likely chance of liberation going? There is a basic will to live that sustains people for a while, but many accounts of these situations describe reaching a point of helplessness and losing even that. So what keeps those people going? The meaning of existence, which I translate to the love of being. That's the answer. The awareness of this fact is what keeps them going. That being in itself is raw, pure love. And this becomes a fact for those people who experience imprisonment, like Nelson Mandela, Viktor Frankl, Frederick Douglass, and Malcolm X, who grew through that experience to reach new spiritual heights, not to mention devote their lives to love and service. The horrors and isolation these people faced did not impact their ability to know joy and participate in change, because they all shared one common basis: the pursuit of liberation for all beings, being underpinned by a liberation that we all already share. All people are free because we are. All people share being as a birthright, and that is unquestionably valuable. Awareness is spiritual. Awareness is sacred. That is why killing is an obvious wrong, and torture is obviously the worst crime that can be committed. Desecration of life is a sin, even to those without a single ounce of religion in their lives, because awareness is a stable ground that has no dogmatic belief attached, and all of us know on some level that we share aliveness, awakeness, and that is what is for each of us unshakably true. And this is my core message for you today, that we can achieve joy and meaning and continue to stay privy to what's going on in current events when knowing awareness in a new way, when being awake to the fact that awareness is, you may feel the absolute freedom that is awareness itself. But you might not feel joy immediately in that experience. When I was a ward of the state as a child, my situation was bleak. Often I felt like a prisoner. Children in the house that I was sent to were punished in a variety of cruel ways, and yet, even at a very young age, I knew one thing could not be stolen from me or taken from those other children: the crystal of who I am. The awareness that I privately know is very real. And that gave me peace and resilience. So maybe you can start there now. When you read the news or go to a protest or even tell an abuser you won't allow their actions to continue in your presence, I suggest you take refuge before, during, and after in the awareness that is hearing these words right now. Because if you're like me, the word is a sound that is received by something. And if you're like me, you don't know what that something is. And I think that's okay. I don't think that's important. What is important is not knowing what is hearing the sound and the word, but knowing that something hears it, that also knows every color you see, every face you know, and it really, at the bottom, knows itself, yourself. I'd like to close with a final passage from the Tao Te Ching, verse 21. The formless and intangible, it gives rise to form, and though vague and elusive, it gives rise to shapes. Though dark and obscure, it is the spirit, the essence, the life breath of all things. But is it real, you ask? I say, its evidence is all of creation. How have I come to know this? That very name has told me. That name which is sounding right here, right now. That's all I have for you today. I humbly ask you to turn toward a deeper meaning for your baseline and let action follow through the clarity that it naturally bestows. I say from experience, life happens right on time if and when we show up as willing participants, willing to set ego aside and be of service to the spirit of life itself. May we meet on that path. Thank you so much for being here with me. I would love to hear what you think about this topic. If this resonates with you, if you are familiar with the term fluid compensation, and how it makes you feel to hear it discussed here today. Anything and everything, I would love to hear from you and to continue this conversation in the comments with you. I'd really like that. Please like, comment, and share if you like this video. Thank you so much again. I'll see you around the channel. Bye.